Yeah, man. This is footwork back at you. So check it out. I was just giving a little thought to this, right? Just thinking about the boxing politics, which I tell you right now, if you're just a casual watcher of boxing, boxing politics suck. One of the reasons they suck is they don't really have any regulation or anything like that, and they're kind of ruled by an oligarchy of boxing um, promoters and managers and these kind of people and a bunch of other characters that are on the periphery of the sport. But the bottom line is, I just wanted to kind of mention this, and some of you people who follow the sport even closer than me, you can chime in on this. Feel free. But anyway, here are my thoughts. So we have we've got a few names here, right? And these are just some that jump out because they're very powerful and they got a lot of pull in the sport. And they're some of the biggest names in the sport. They manage the most fighters, or they're involved in some of the bigger networks and platforms that promote fighters inside of this sport. And so that's why I'm just kind of talking about it right now. But the whole premise of this is to talk about why these guys don't have legacies. I just find it very interesting that they're the head of these like multi-billion-dollar organizations and everything, and they got all these connections in the sport. And maybe it's like other industries where it takes a certain combination to create a leader, and not everyone that is within their circles are leaders. I just think this is just an interesting little observation, and so I'm gonna give it to you. All right. So going back into the day, you had this guy named Tex Richard, and he managed Jack Johnson. So this was, way back in the day, probably almost 100 years ago, at least 80. And he was a big time promoter. He promoted some of the big fights back during Jack Dempsey's time. But to my uh, knowledge, I don't think he ever really had a successor that he created a brand and somebody that he taught and mentored followed up on his work. And then I noticed kind of the same thing about Don King. I don't know if some of you remember, but Don King at one time was the man in the sport of boxing. And his name was always attached to some of the biggest names from Ali to Tyson, right? And he ruled boxing with an iron fist. But eventually, this guy up here, Bob Arum, he used to work with Don King, and he eventually split off. And over the course of several decades, he ended up crushing Don King. And Don King is like pretty much a nobody in the sport. He's still around, but his promotional outfit is nothing like it was back in the 80s, right? And he used to put on, I'm talking about spectacular cards, just great cards, especially compared to a lot of the things that you see now. But in addition to this, you got a bunch of fighters that are really creating their own promotional platforms. And that's really a whole nother topic all by itself. But promoters are creating their own companies, they're promoting themselves, and they're also promoting fighters under their umbrella as well. That's the case with this guy right here, Oscar De La Hoya. And he used to fight under this guy's banner, Bob Arum, who is super, super powerful. He's clicked in with ESPN, and they have, lots of money backing them because, they have the backing of a huge network. But he split off from him and created his own promotional entity called Golden Boy Promotions, and now he's doing his own thing. And then pretty much on this level, you've got Frank Warren. So I would kind of consider them, levels above Don King at this point. But Frank Warren, he's promoted like your Tyson Furies, the WBC heavyweight champion of the world, the guy who beat Deontay Wilder. And then pretty much at the top of the sport, you got these names. And this is not like all encompassing, but this is just to give you an idea of kind of what's going on at the highest levels up here. You got, like I said, Bob Arum, and then you got this guy named Barry Hearn, and then his son Eddie. They're running a promotional outfit outside of the UK, right? And they work with a network called DAZN, which pretty much shows fights on an exclusive platform that you have to pay for, right? And then you have Al Heyman over here, which is kind of like an advisor, and he's with PBC, which they kind of are tied into Fox Sports and Showtime. And so that he has really a lot of black fighters on his roster, but he has other fighters as well. But the fighters really like his style of management and consultation or whatever. I don't really hear very many fighters complain about their business dealings with Al Heyman. And he came from, I believe, music promotions over into boxing and brought a lot of knowledge from that and showed fighters how to make money. So the PBC banner that he kind of represents or works with or whatever, they've made a few questionable decisions in my opinion. But again, another topic for another time. But just to give us an idea of what we're working with, these are some of the top names. And the only reason I'm kind of talking about this is because I noticed that these are one of the few kind of like promotional dynasties that you're going to see in boxing. But for the most part, you don't really see names taking up the mantle. I'm talking about not just family members, but like anyone. There's no one that's really being mentored that just shows the acumen to kind of take up the banner and push their brand forward, so that whenever these guys are ready to retire or whatever they're going to do, that somebody's going to take up the mantle in their name and then push forward from there. And especially this guy over here, Bob Arum, is probably like 119 years old at this point. And he's still talking about what fights he's going to make and what fight he doesn't want to see and all this kind of stuff. And, this guy was, he was, I think, in his 40s back in the Ali era when he was working with Ali. So, I mean, at this point, he's still running this promotional outfit called Top Rank, right? And I don't hear of anyone that's been designated to kind of pick up the mantle and push it forward. At this point, this guy needs like CBD and all this kind of stuff just to continue to function. But he's still at the top of like a multi-billion-dollar organization. And it's like at some point, it's just time to give it a rest, dude. Okay? I mean, you've done it all, okay? And at some point, it's time to kind of turn it over. And so, again, I don't know what's going to happen whenever he leaves the sport. Who's going to step in and take over this and that relationship with ESPN? And so I think, just my guess is that it takes a unique talent to work within this sport. I've heard of Jay-Z and 50 Cent trying to jump into boxing, and both of those guys failed. I've heard of other failed attempts for external people to get involved with boxing. Even Mike Tyson, I believe, his promotional outfit has kind of struggled a little bit from time to time, and he's been in the sport, and so, boxing is kind of like the Wild Wild West, man. And so this is just my 2 cents on it. And just the big question is where in the heck are the legacies being established here? And so I just think boxing is one of those unique niche type of sports where, you don't really create a dynasty in here that lasts for decades and decades, and one that is set up to run without you or beyond your tenure. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. This is Footwork, man, and I'm out.